I'm not saying I agree with it, but I understand that Tyron Smith signed a costly contract. I understand that Stephon Gilmore is going to ask for legitimate money in the market, but not re signing Jonathan Hankins. I think that feels like a kick in the groin. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get to tonight's show. Here we go. What is up, everyone, and welcome into A to Z Sports Dallas Prime Time. I am your host, Mauricio Rodriguez, streaming with you live every Sunday through Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central here on Dallas On Demand Sports Talk Network with a lot more content coming your way. Make sure you check out atozsports.com/Dallas. And as always, do me a favor and hit the like button for me if you enjoy the show. Welcome, everyone, on a Tuesday night. It is a great night to talk some Cowboys football. And yeah, today, not an eventful day, really, on Cowboys free agency as we've been used to since it started last week and years prior. But today did feel like a final blow to any hopes that the Cowboys were about to get busy in free agency or that they were going to be even remotely aggressive in free agency. And I'm saying this because, as I said on the intro, Tyron Smith, I really thought the Cowboys needed to re-sign him ahead of the 2024 season. I strongly believe that. I believe they messed up by not wanting to bring him back. I believe that even with the contract that he signed with the New York Jets, that's something that the Cowboys could have easily done. The numbers are out, by the way, on the incentives on Tyron Smith. And I believe you look at them and you kind of realize, hey, this could have been done. I thought it was going to be closer to $10 million as the cap number. I think it's going to be a little bit over $12 million, but it could have been done by the Cowboys if they wanted to do it. I'm still upset at that one. I understand that if they don't bring back Stephon Gilmore, it's going to be because he asks for $5+ million in free agency, probably. Chances are on a 1-year deal. Like, at least with those players, I felt like you had an argument. But today, Jonathan Hankins signed with the Seattle Seahawks. That is the news on Tuesday, reported by NFL Network, reported by Dallas Morning News. And Jonathan Hankins, man, is a surprise to me. It's not necessarily a surprise that they didn't keep Tyron Smith. It's not going to be a surprise if they don't keep Stephon Gilmore. Other losses like Armstrong, like Fowler, among others, Biadish, those maybe are not really a surprise. But Jonathan Hankins, here's why it surprised me. And I even made a show about this, I think, when free agency was about to begin. I really thought this was going to be kind of like an automatic type deal because I thought that the circumstances were perfect for an easy and smooth transaction. One, the Cowboys need the defensive tackle help and the defensive tackle depth. You can talk about Massey Smith all you want, and we can have all sorts of discussions about whether or not we think Massey Smith is going to take a second-year jump, about whether or not we think what happened in 2023 is his fault or not, because the Cowboys did ask him to lose weight. We can have that discussion any day of the week. Whenever you want to, we can have it. However, let's be real about it. The Cowboys don't know who Massey Smith is a nose tackle because, one, it's only his second year in the NFL, and two, you asked him to play a different position or a different style in 2023, his first year in the NFL. So it's kind of tough to make a plan betting all the money on Massey Smith and being like, hey, we don't even need an insurance policy, and one that it's going to be relatively cheap because that's the situation with Jonathan Hankins. So one, reasons why I thought it was going to be a smooth and automatic transaction to re-sign Jonathan Hankins. One, you have the need. Number two, you have a player that wants to return because Jonathan Hankins was public about his desire to return to Dallas. And three, he is not going to be costly. I don't know what the Seahawks are going to pay him. The numbers are not out as of right now, but I can guarantee you it's not going to be like a $5 million deal or anything like that he signed with the Seattle Seahawks, because reports are even on him signing a 1 year deal, not a 2 year deal where you can be like, well, maybe the guaranteed money was where the Cowboys didn't want to commit to him. Because, Hankins has been in the league for 10 plus years. He's not likely to get that sort of deal where he's going to get 2 years of guaranteed money unless he's playing at a very, very high level. And again, I do think Jonathan Hankins is a good football player, but it's just not the position or the sort of talent that you pay that kind of money to. Chances are when those numbers come out, there's going to be no defense for the Cowboys. Because I think when that contract comes out, the only thing that we are not gonna see from that deal is, I don't think it's gonna be a minimum. What is it? The salary benefit contract, the veteran salary benefit contract. Like, it's not gonna be one of those where you're paying a veteran minimum money, but because you're paying a league veteran, then he basically counts for about half the money you're paying him towards the salary cap. So you pay him over $2 million, but he counts like 1 point something million dollars. That's the kind of deal that Jonathan Hankins was brought back on in 2023. And I think that the only thing that happened this year is that the Seattle Seahawks also wanted Hankins, and they got to a place where they were like, hey, listen, we're going to up the offer a little bit, and you're going to come play for us instead of the Cowboys. And the Cowboys were just not willing to match it. I cannot say this for certain because the numbers are not out, but you and I both know that contract is not going to be the kind of contract. My dog just went crazy. He's barking. He's also pissed at the Cowboys right now. It's not going to be the kind of contract that you go, oh, yeah, the Cowboys could not have done this. It's not going to be that kind of deal, because if we're being real, the only deals the Cowboys are pulling off are those cheap, inexpensive ones. They're not bringing back Tyron Smith. I don't see how they bring back Stephon Gilmore at this stage. I know it's one of the biggest questions right now remaining in free agency for the Cowboys, but I don't see how they bring back Stephon Gilmore. Based on the decisions that they've made this offseason, it makes sense to me they're not bringing him back, because they're not interested in signing a free agent who is not worth minimum value right now. I don't know if you can still hear my dog, but he might be just as pissed off as we are about the way that the Cowboys have handled free agency so far. I think Gilly is not coming back, again, based on how they've done things. But mostly, I think that the Hankins ordeal just left me at a place where, man, I didn't expect you to bring back Stephon by now. I'm not shocked at you not bringing back Tyron Smith, but I absolutely did not expect Jonathan Hankins to not be a Cowboy in 2024. I didn't expect it to happen that way. So let me get to some of the comments, rant over. Holly says the dog is mad at the Joneses too. Yeah, man, he's upset. Bruce says most dog is a verbal outrage of Cowboys Nation. Mark Aaron says, who let the dogs out? David Cowboy says your dog wants to pee on Jerry's leg. Man, I can guarantee you he wants to. Let's see. Ryan is with me, though. Gillian coming back. They signed Jordan Lewis for a reason. And I hate that Ryan is onto something, but I hate that it shouldn't be that way. Know what I'm saying? We shouldn't be at a spot where we're like, well, they brought back Jordan Lewis on a minimum type deal. That means they're not bringing back Gilmore. One shouldn't rule out the other, is what I'm trying to say. But we know how they operate. And we're like, yeah, it's not happening because they brought back Lewis, But it's just the signing of everything. Like, I can see, I can just see the way that the Cowboys are operating this offseason. And I can tell you this. One of the things that we've said all this time is they always do this. They always do this in free agency. They're always quiet. They never make any sort of big moves or anything like that. But also kind of not. That's kind of a lie a little bit, because I don't think it's been this bad in a while. Like, even last year, you traded for Brandon Cooks. You traded for Stephon Gilmore. And these were moves that happened like and I'm trying to Google this just to give you the exact date. But this didn't happen like late in the year. Brandon Cooks was traded for March 19th, which might give you some hope because it's precisely March 19th, and that might mean that hey, if they're gonna pull off a trade, it's gonna be something like this. But then what are they trading this year when you have so many needs and you need all of those draft picks? Stephon Gilmore was traded for on March 14th. So no, I'm not precisely sure this is the same as last offseason. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that hey, Gilmore and getting Gilmore and getting Brandon Cooks was a huge costly move, because it really wasn't. They just let go of a couple of day 3 draft picks, but they're also not. They were something. They were covering some of the underrated needs that you maybe didn't want to reach for in the NFL draft, right? Cowboys needed cornerback depth, and they got Gilmore. Imagine if they didn't make that move and Trevon Diggs went down. It would have been ugly, defensively speaking, versus the pass. And then you look at the wide receiver position and the way that Michael Gallup didn't precisely improve in 2023, and Jalen Tolbert maybe improved, but it wasn't really like a breakout type year for him in his second year in the NFL. It also would have been bad in 2023, because when the Cowboys offense really got cooking, when it really got going and reached that level of consistency, was when Brandon Cooks started getting involved. Because even when the Cowboys were doing well on offense and they were putting points on the board and they were having these massive performances, offensively speaking, we still wondered, like, hey, man, should Brandon Cooks be involved a little bit more? And then it started happening, and we were like, hey, we are cooking. It started happening after the Eagles game over in Philadelphia. And that's when we were super excited about where the Cowboys offense was going. But now there's none of that to really point towards, and there's only losses, if we're being real. Cowboys season ended, and they were like, we want to improve in the run game. And that went both for offense and it went for defense. We want to get better running the football, and we want to get better stopping the run. Here's the tally. All right. You got Eric Kendricks. So, all right, you got a little boost there at linebacker. But I'm not sure that the needle was really moved when you're also losing Leighton Van Der Esch to retirement/injury, something you maybe cannot control. But I'll tell you what you can control. You could have controlled Jonathan Hankins coming back for another year, because, man, Jonathan Hankins was missed when he was not on the field last year. And Jonathan Hankins, his mark was felt immediately when he arrived in 2022. It was an instant impact player up front, just taking up space. I'm not telling you that you could see Jonathan Hankins' impact in a stat sheet, because you really couldn't. But he did take up a lot of space, and he did his job, a nose tackle type job, right? You're losing, offensively speaking, and you're not adding anybody else, by the way, because that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the tally on defense in terms of linebacker and defensive tackle. But you're losing over 700 snaps in edge rusher play, because you're losing Armstrong and you're losing Fowler. Now, offensively, where you got to get better to run the football, you're losing the left tackle, who is a second-team All-Pro. You're losing the center, who, hey, you might upgrade, who knows, but you're losing him. You're losing your running back. And again, I'm not saying Tony Pollard was a great player or anything like that, but I'm saying I'm not happy. I'm not happier about where the running back room is at least today. That might change in the NFL draft, but it's, those needs are piling up. They sure are piling up. Shout out to Joe Hoyt, who has been here on the show with us, and he tweeted out, you can't take best player available and have it fit with your needs when you have needs everywhere. And he tweeted with the gif of that guy, like, thinking. And that's where we're at right now. You also might move another of your old pro players from his position, because you might have to move Tyler Smith from left guard to left tackle. And one thing is being a second team all pro left guard. A whole different one is being a second team all pro left tackle. We don't know if Tyler Smith has that kind of play if he is kicked outside. So in your two biggest areas that you wanted to focus on in the offseason, you've gotten worse. You've not gotten better at all. You've gotten worse in multiple positions, to the point where we're like, man, they're a good drafting team. We'll feel better after the NFL draft. I'm not saying we won't. We will feel better, because we at least will have some answers. But I'm not sure the Cowboys are moving forward. I think they are moving backward. And then some people are like, hey, man, they're blowing it up and they're rebuilding. It's not the proper way to go about rebuilding, even if that's the idea behind it. Because the biggest reason why, based on what we've seen in free agency, and I didn't want to believe this to be true, and it's a theory that was shared in January, but I didn't want to believe it was true. But based on the way that they're doing things in free agency, where all the deals they're doing are the super cheap ones and not the expensive ones, like, Mike is the head coach because they don't want to pay out his contract, right? That's where we are at, right? I'm not sure we've seen anything from them that makes me believe, nah, they really want to run it back with Mike McCarthy, and they really want to do like this maybe all-in type year, but maybe a year where they're really trying with Mike. I'm not sure we're seeing any of that. I think we're seeing confirmation that all of their moves are the cheap moves only. And, they're keeping Mike McCarthy only to not pay out the head coach's contract. I think that's where we're at right now. Because if this was a straight up rebuild, you would have started the rebuild with another coach, right? You would have gotten a coach in here to ask you for the kind of players that he wants on this so-called rebuild. This is the outcome that I still think we're going to witness here in the next year or couple of years. I still think the Cowboys are going to pay Dak. I don't think they're going to let Micah or CD walk either. But I think that even when they take care of that sort of deals, it's going to be the same old, where it's going to be same approach in free agency. I don't think they're going to be changing anything. It's just going to be the same competitive team that doesn't take the risks that are needed to go all the way, or to go, forget about all the way, 1-2 steps further, where going to the divisional round isn't the highlight of the last 10 years. Because that's what we've witnessed in the last 30 years. The divisional round years are the highlights for us, man. And that is tough. That is really, really tough. But anyways, let's get to some of the comments here. William White says, we need Will McClay to work his magic like he used to do. No, William, you're close. But here's what we need. We need Will McClay to go full succession mode, backstaff Stephen Jones, Jerry Jones somehow, and be like, I'm the captain of this chip. Right? Well, kidding aside, like, I agree with William. That's obviously what we need. But, man, Jay Tuck, man, shout out to Tuck. He tweeted out that the Cowboys are better in undrafted free agency than they are in free agency. And immediately my response was, well, one of them is handled by Will McClay. The other one is handled by this guy that has a football hobby. More than he's a football guy, he's a rich kid with a football hobby. Katharina says they just need to sell the team already, Mo. Man, it's been a sad offseason so far, I think, for the Cowboys and for Cowboys fans. And the worst thing is we're like, getting ready. I mean, not getting used to it at dangerous levels. Ryan G says Jimmy Johnson got hired by Dallas in an advisory role. Man, Jimmy joked about it, I think. Let's see here. Michael says they need to get rid of the quarterback. And the sad thing is, I don't think that is a problem. And I say the sad thing because I do think there's a large portion of this fan base that believes that's the issue. And there's this tweet making the rounds lately with the following stat. Between 2021 and 2022, 19 quarterbacks were drafted and 2 are set to start in 2024. And one of them is a first overall pick, Trevor Lawrence, and the other one is last pick of the NFL draft, Brock Purdy. I think the way that Cowboys fans should perceive this whole thing, this whole issue, is how can the Cowboys have been so lucky to find back-to-back franchise quarterbacks and yet do nothing to take advantage of it? I think that's the real thing that we should be discussing. Not if they got to get rid of the quarterback. It's how can we have 2 guys that we stumbled upon because they didn't draft Dak Prescott thinking he was going to be their eventual franchise QB. And they didn't sign Tony Romo in undrafted free agency thinking that he was going to be the next franchise QB. Because if you think like that of a player, you drafted him in the first round. No questions asked, right? The Cowboys stumbled upon these 2 guys. And they're the reason why the Cowboys have been competitive or pseudo-competitive, however you want to call it, in the last 20-something years. That's a reality. That is a reality. Not that they're the problem or they've been the problem. I agree with Chris here, who says if Cowboys ever get rid of Dak, we are screwed big time. Yeah, absolutely we are. The Packers are a team that at least has been actively seeking their replacements, right? They went from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, who they picked in the first round and let him develop. After that, they went and got Jordan Love in the first round, and they waited around for his development, and then they got rid of Aaron Rodgers. And that's 3 back-to-back-to-back franchise QBs. At least it seems, right? With Jordan Love, might be too early to tell, but I think we've seen enough to understand that, hey, Jordan Love is going to be around for a good while there in Green Bay, already getting paid and everything. Gonna get paid, for a long time, I believe. But anyways, at least they did it proactively. Drafted somebody in the first round, didn't mind the criticism, didn't mind the hate, and just went on with their plan. With the Cowboys, man, it's been more about luck. if we're being real with you. And then Cam says Dak's money is a problem. Not really. They want you to believe Dak's money is a problem. But if we're being completely honest with ourselves, the Cowboys are bottom 5 in cash spending in last year, right? It's the cheapest payroll, one of the cheapest payrolls, in the NFL this year. And that's because this is how they do things, right? They don't have cap space because they don't want to have cap space because they could open up cap space like this. And specifically for a team that's been so close in the sense that they won 12 games in 3 years in a row, you would expect the Cowboys to be more aggressive with the salary cap and just keep kicking the can down the road and keep pushing those worries until the future. The cap space is a problem, not the Dak Prescott money. And the cap space is a problem because the Cowboys choose for it to be a problem so they can get in front of the media and they can be like, oh yeah, it's a salary cap, man. We don't have cap space. And then restructure somebody knowing that they can restructure many other players, blah, blah, blah. They can extend that, bring down the cap number, blah, blah, blah. Because again, there are teams out there paying their QBs that are still making moves in free agency, making moves in several ways. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on a little bit here on the show. And I wanted to run through a quick update on offensive tackles, man, because as we get closer to the NFL draft, we kind of are thinking, what do you do now? Because you need a center, you need a tackle or a guard. You need a linebacker. You need a running back. You need this. You need that. You need this. Could the Cowboys sign somebody? Basically, is my question in free agency, especially on the offensive line. And I just wanted to say, I don't think there are many offensive tackles out there at this point. Trent Brown is in the overlay because he was signed today by Cincinnati. So he's off the board. And that's somebody that I was at least keeping an eye out on because maybe the Cowboys wanted to throw a dart at one of these free agent left tackles. So here's more or less the recap of the top offensive tackles out there in free agency. Tyron Smith signing with the Jets, as I'm sure you know. Trent Brown going with the Bengals. Mike Onwenu sticking with the New England Patriots. There's Jonah Williams going to Arizona. There's Eluemunor going to the Giants. And then there are two names sitting there in free agency where things have been so frustrating for Dallas, where I'm like, yeah, I'll probably give them a deal, just to have an insurance policy going into the NFL draft. I would look at Mekhi Becton, and I hate it because Mekhi Becton has had twice the problems with availability than Tyron has already in his career, kind of. It's been a rough start to his career with many injuries, but Mekhi Becton was a top lineman going into his NFL draft. And he's out there, he's available. Becton, I know, is kind of controversial because some people use injury problems to basically rule him out immediately. And I understand why. But are the Cowboys at a spot where there's really no other choice and it could be worth a flyer just in case you're wiped out at offensive line, especially tackle, once you are on the clock with the 24th overall pick? That's one signing that I could see them making because it also fits the bill of what they like. Upside type of bet, low risk, high reward with a player who suffered injuries, but who, when he is healthy, he can be a good player, right? I could see Mekhi Becton being somebody that the Cowboys target. And then another name that is out there is Donovan Smith. Donovan Smith, weird name because he's been a quality veteran for a while now. But there were some concerns about him when he was about to play with the Kansas City Chiefs in 2023. And I feel like mostly those concerns were confirmed pretty much. And Donovan Smith was an issue, a liability for the Kansas City Chiefs, which is why they didn't even bother re-signing him. So I'm not sure about Donovan Smith either. Got beaten inside pretty consistently last year. He was a problem in pass pro. But again, are the Cowboys in a spot where they're like, F it, we got to have somebody, and we got to have an insurance policy in case we cannot add somebody else in the NFL draft, excuse me. Overall, though, I'm not expecting them to sign an offensive tackle. I think the Cowboys are forcing themselves to pick one or basically resigning themselves to having Tyler Smith kicked outside. And I say resigning themselves because I do think the Cowboys wanted Tyler Smith to stay at left guard instead of moving to left tackle. So there's that. And lastly, but not least, before we get out of here, and actually let me read some of your comments before that. Mark Aaron says his cap space is a problem, talking about Dak, not his money. Big difference. Undersized defense was the most, I think Cam mentions, the biggest problem, I think. I'm not sure if that's what he meant, but yeah. I see that it says we're going to fight the G-Men for the basement of the division. Man, I also think it's maybe not going to be as bad, right? But it's looking like the NFC East streak is going to be difficult to break in 2023, in 2024, based on how the Cowboys are doing things, right? William White says, with the amount of needs that we have, should Dallas move out of the first round to pick up additional picks? Ideally, William, trading down is always an attractive option. I'll say that. I also think it's always unlikely to happen because you got to have like that trade partner. I'm not sure if this is going to be the kind of draft where that opportunity comes up. And I also think that the Cowboys are going to be picking at a weird spot where there are going to be multiple linemen off the board by then. And the Cowboys, it's going to be risky for them to drop back and find their guy later on. Like, I think they would just much rather pick their dude at 24th overall instead of getting another pick in return. But it could always happen. I think the Cowboys, maybe in certain situations, would love to trade down. But I also think if you absolutely need a left tackle or an offensive lineman, why would you why would you why would you pass on him is what I'm trying to say. I understand the value of getting an additional pick, but what if you lose your guy? Like, that's dangerous. That is a dangerous situation. If it's a small jump back, then what are you really getting in return, right? Because it's likely going to be like a day 3 pick if it's just a couple of picks or a few picks you're jumping behind. So we'll see. I think trading back always gets a lot of speculation, and then it just so rarely ends up happening because I think a lot of teams want to trade back. A lot of teams want to make more picks, but we'll see. Last but not least, I wanted to talk about the Jackson Powers Johnson hype coming back. It's if we had a segment like Pardon My Take does when they do who's back of the week, Jackson Powers Johnson to the Cowboys talk would be my who's back of the week. Let me tell you why. The Oregon center who bursted into the scene at the Senior Bowl, and obviously we knew who he was. He was one of the best center prospects, but he was one of the biggest winners in Alabama where the Senior Bowl took place. And for a while there, the hype was so big that we saw him being drafted in the top 15 in several mocks. We saw him being taken in the top 20 in several mocks. We heard all sorts of stuff about him to the point where the Cowboys, picking 24th overall, we started to believe, you know what? Powers Johnson might not be there at 24th. Well, I'm starting to believe that he might. And I think 2 mock drafts came out today that really reinforce that feeling. And here's what I'm trying to say. Daniel Jeremiah and Mel Kiper put out mock draft today. And we're talking about big names in the industry, big names whose mocks you gotta pay attention to, not because they're great draft evaluators, which they are, but because they're hearing stuff already as we get closer to the NFL draft. And there were several things that happened in those mocks. First and foremost, and the most obvious one, Daniel Jeremiah had the Cowboys taking Jackson Powers Johnson 24th overall. Mel Kiper, though, had Jackson Powers Johnson falling out of the first round. And there's something even more interesting about that couple of mocks. There was another guard / center going before Jackson Powers Johnson. So the whole argument about Jackson Powers Johnson just falling because of his position might not be valid when you're seeing somebody else go before him. And I'm not even talking about Troy Fautanu, who could also be perceived as a tackle. I'm talking about Graham Barton, who in both mocks went to the Miami Dolphins 21st overall. So I kind of look at that and I'm like, man, JPJ could be a strong possibility at 24th. And here is my plea, okay? Here is my plea to the Cowboys. If they get to 24th overall and say they've got JPJ, Fautanu, maybe they've got Tyler Guyton, or whoever else you want to get into this conversation of realistic targets at 24th. Even though left tackle is such a key position, just take the best guy. If JPJ is the best guy, take JPJ, and let's enjoy having such a center up front who can be a physical presence in the run game. Don't force the pick just because one is a tackle and the other one isn't. If it comes down to it, you didn't even have a plan for Tyler Smith, so just change it and go play him at left tackle and play TJ Voss or something at left guard, right? But at least I would feel better about Tyler Smith at left tackle and then JPJ at center. I would feel a little bit better about this whole offseason if that ends up happening. But ladies and gentlemen, having said that, that will be it for me tonight here on the show. As always, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to A to Z Sports Dallas Prime Time. It's been an honor talking about the Cowboys for yet another night with you. And I'll be talking to you again tomorrow, 8 p.m. Central, here on A to Z Sports Dallas Prime Time. Shout out to all of you who joined the show, and I'll see you tomorrow. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about. But man, tonight it was time for some venting. See you. Bye-bye.